of Bright Foundation, which is a public benefit organization. They are involved in education, the empowering of people with disabilities, poverty alleviation, nature conservation, and the promotion of the arts and culture. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Franco.
I was very fortunate to grow up on a cattle and maize farm in the rural Northwest Province, far away from bright city lights and big business. In such a community with its huge inherent risk and consequent focus on survival, I encountered philanthropy at an early age, even though the term itself was foreign to me. When I was about 10 years old, I noticed the cornerstone of our small school building, which housed between 50 and 60 kids from grade 1 to grade 7, and that it was laid by my maternal grandfather. That was not of much importance to me, but I became curious when I saw a similar thing at the church, the community hall, and at the co-op. I asked my mother why this was the case, whether there was a secret in our family that I actually had a politician as a grandfather. And she replied, no, he was none of the sort. He did these things because he cared, and he believed that he had a duty to make a difference to where he lived. It was only when I went to university and I discovered that part of my studies was funded by the Roodman Study Trust that he created for his descendants 30 years ago, that I started delving deeper into this person. I learned that he was a remarkable, resourceful and enterprising man who rose from humble beginnings to become a legend in our region in his time. His philanthropic acts went far beyond our little settlement. As someone who experienced the ravages of the Anglo-Boer War and had to deal with the destruction of the burnt land policy that brought that upon farming communities, rendering thousands impoverished and incapable of taking care of themselves, even more so after the Great Drought and Depression in the early 1930s. He was committed to everything he could, to do everything he could to improve the life of those affected. Although he was a teacher by training and a farmer by profession later, he was very committed to transforming the area where he lived. But he soon realized that its limitations, and he thought wider. And he was instrumental in organizing the struggling farmers in our area into the Northwest Cooperative to improve their skills and their buying power. He was a co-founder of Redding's Dartbond, a countrywide organization aimed in the 1930s at alleviating the deep poverty many Afrikaners found themselves in at the time. And was also a co-founder of the First National Bank, sadly not the one today, otherwise I'd be able to give a lot more, which was aimed at providing banking services to people who were very much excluded from a formal banking sector at the time. Isn't it amazing, 90 years later, that how many of the same challenges we still are faced with across our continent? Much of this I learned by thumbing through a battered copy of the Who's Who of South Africa of somewhere in the 1930s, which I found hidden in the bookshelves of our bedroom on the farm. My father never told me any of this, and only filled in some details when I asked. I thought it was not just that special, it was just a case of someone caring for his community. That made a deep impression on me, and I resolved to do something similar, should I ever be fortunate enough to do so. I also was very much under the impression that if I were able to do so, one should do it in an understated manner. This resulted in the formation many years later of the Bright Foundation, and which became a shareholder of the Bright Group from its inception in the early 2000s. I realized that the tax laws, as I'll touch upon later, are very unforgiving when it comes to donating money. Once you've made it, you better give it away before you make it. So we decided to give a significant amount of the equity of our new group to the Bright Foundation when we started it. And so the concept of sharing and giving away became embedded in the DNA of our group and every business that we've become involved in subsequently. Margaret Mead said, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. In fact, it is the only thing that ever has." Ladies and gentlemen, life is not linear. I learned that over and over again. Every time when I think back about the trials and tribulations, swings and roundabouts, dead ends and highways, bad luck and incredible synchronicity that shaped my career and our business, I feel very fortunate and under the deep impression of our obligation to share not only the financial rewards we were entrusted with, but also the lessons we learned and the skills and insights we developed along the way. Much of Africa's current successes and future potential resides in the business sector. Entrepreneurship, the efficient allocation of capital and management of human and financial capital, the development and utilization of technological innovation in harnessing our resources can and should drive us forward, converting the proverbial dark continent into the bright continent, no pun intended, where the future resides. This will only happen if we match business with the need to protect our environment and nurture our people. It is a sad truth, as a businessman I have to admit, that the bigger a business is, the more it objectifies the resources it uses, especially the environment and the people that's not directly involved in it. The bigger the business, the more abstract the thinking. Africa needs big business though, with ambitious projects to transform itself into an economic powerhouse. But in itself, this carries enormous risk. Governments are the primary agents tasked with providing the legal and institutional framework within which businesses should both flourish and be contained. Unfortunately, power and greed are two gods, which, while powerful on their own, becomes almost irresistible when combined. And I want to say that again. Power and greed are two gods, which, while powerful on their own, become almost irresistible when combined. Our continent is riddled with examples of these forces in action, resulting in a disregard for and abuse of people and the environment. The only counter to greed and power is love. Philanthropy is love in action. Without philanthropy at every level, we will destroy as much, if not more, than we create. In order to be an effective counterweight to these powerful forces, philanthropy needs to learn the secrets of their success and employ that in a benevolent manner. While every good deed and initiative makes a difference, philanthropic efforts need to be better coordinated, focused and results-driven if we wish to optimize its impact and meet the very visible challenge of greed and corruption. This is not a new challenge, ladies and gentlemen. Aristotle said many centuries ago, to give away money is an easy matter and in any man's power. But to decide whom to give it, and how large, and when, and for what purpose, and how, is neither in every man's power nor an easy matter. I think that's very true. This was amplified by James Allen Smith, who stated somewhat darkly that the greatest harms occur when gifts are bestowed haphazardly, without forethought, without regard to their effects. Hence my delight at this initiative taken to hold this conference to provide critical analysis of the state of philanthropy across the continent, its strengths and challenges, philosophical roots and ambitions, funders, managers and objectives. The better we understand who the players are and what they are driven and motivated by, what areas of intervention are being targeted or left out, share the lessons that we've learned by success and failure, the more true to our calling and the more successful as philanthropists we will be. Since philanthropic acts invariably do what governments are really supposed to do with our tax money, but often fail to do, because of a number of reasons. There are understandable causes such as lack of income, competing priorities, limited executing capacity, etc. There are also many unforgivable ones, such as disregard for its people, corruption, ineptitude. One would think that governments would go out of their way to create a legal and regulatory framework to encourage philanthropic giving. Sadly, this is not the case in South Africa, nor to my knowledge anywhere else in Africa. In fact, my sense is that legislation in our country is driven to limit the amount of money you can give away. Everything but a modest percentage of your income will be regarded as a donation, attracting a tax of around 20%. This would be understandable if one were merely giving money away in order to reduce your estate for tax purposes, but it's clearly counterproductive when genuine philanthropy is at play. This is very significantly different to America, for example, where if you donate your whole art collection to a museum, the whole amount gets deducted from tax because it's a national gift to the benefit of it all. And really in the end, what about tax money? It is a national gift to the benefit of it all. It becomes an alternative way of taxation. No such rules exist in Africa, as far as I know. And it should be a major thing that we all together in the philanthropic ecosystem should work towards lobbying, towards lobbying government to have more generous rules pertaining to giving. Our tax laws does address this to some extent in Section 18 of the Income Tax Act, which allow for the registration of public benefit organizations, which are exempt from capital gains and income taxes once functional, provided that certain strict criteria are met. And as Cici said last night, lots and lots of paper have to be put. Anyway, it's still there, and if you donate your capital to such a public benefit organization, however, you would only get a modest deduction, and the rest of the amounts that you've given will still be subject to a 20% tax. I think that is crazy. Very limited tax incentives also exist for the formation of entities focused on nature conservation, etc. Philosophically, this comes from the deep belief by governments all across the world, and in Africa in particular, that itself is the best custodian of good causes in our country. I believe this is naive and counterproductive. In my daily life, and I'm sure in yours, I see an incredible number of philanthropic initiatives in action. In our household, at our school, community, at work, in our fields of interest such as conservation and the arts. In fact, these activities provide the oxygen necessary for the functionality and survival of activities that shape and enrich our lives way beyond the scope of any governmental interventions. And this should be encouraged rather than hindered by legislation. Art shares many characteristics with philanthropy. It is born out of the very best of us. Our imagination, our creativity, our willingness to expose ourselves, our concerns with the issues of the day that troubles us, our need to express ourselves meaningfully outside the sphere of survival or profit. Both art and philanthropy transcend boundaries, continents, language, race. Both has the power to transform the way we think and operate, how and what we do and what we care about. I believe we can judge a country by the way you treat art and artists, and I believe much the same applies to philanthropy and philanthropists. At the Bright Foundation, we are annually inundated with the needs of our society, whether it be poverty relief, education, medical emergency, etc. And although we apply most of our available funding to education, providing 34 scholarships for students at universities across the country this year, we carve out every year a certain section of our income to dedicate it to support the art and nature conservation projects. It's a very clear challenge for everyone involved in philanthropic giving. Where you apply your capital, what do you direct your efforts to? There are so much need out there. It's very easy to get confused and ineffective. So we believe that over and above recognizing very clear needs, such as education, you should try and make a change in those activities or fields of endeavor that you really love. And for us, art and nature conservation are two activities which we believe every year we should give, because through the act of giving, we become more. And the more we give, the more benefit and the more impact we have.